situation, perhaps in an interview or maybe in a conversation with someone, where there was some confidential information that you could not share, but you did not want to appear as if you're being evasive or elusive, especially when you're having those very meaningful conversations, such as in an interview? This happens often with people that are in different types of leadership roles. And if you have been a leader for any point in time, you will know that there have been situations where there is confidential information that you just can't simply talk about. And sometimes it's very difficult to understand how do you even have a conversation about it? What do you do? How do you say it? When do you say it, etc. Well, this video, I'm going to share with you how to handle those confidential pieces of information the right way in your interview setting specifically, but this can be applied to any type of role that you are in or conversation that you're having. This is a higher level, definitely more of an advanced type of communication skill, because if you are in a situation where you are providing a conversation and you have confidential information that you can't share, then you are already at a heightened level in your particular career. Now, I want to give a shout out to Forensic Accountant. We had a conversation about this earlier this year, and he requested to talk more about this topic in terms of what does this mean specifically and go into more detail for the audience, because these situations happen. And there's not a book out there that says this is what you do whenever you have this situation happen and it's confidential information. So if you're watching this video right now, you are watching the replay, and I'm really glad that you are here today and watching the replay. There is typically a point in the YouTube live videos where people will join. And give me just a few moments to say hello to everyone, and then we'll get back into how you can handle confidential information in interviews the right way so that you come across as still being that very warm candidate instead of being someone that might be a bit elusive or evasive. So let me look at the chat. Okay, Forensic Accountant, hello, welcome. Glad you're here today. So I gave you a shout out earlier, a few moments ago, because this is a topic that you had mentioned specifically to go into a bit more detail in. And so in this video, we're going to talk a bit about that. I really appreciate Forensic Accountant for coming up with this topic. It is a very, very good topic, because sometimes you just don't know how to have these conversations when it is confidential information that you know you just can't share, but you're not sure, well, how do I share it? So if this is something that you are interested in learning more about in terms of how you can master how you communicate to other people, then this is the place for you to be this evening. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you like this content so far, and if you like it, feel free to hit the like button. It allows more people to watch this information, and I guarantee you're going to get some gems out of my conversation with you today. So Amy, hello, welcome. Amy, how are you doing today? White Wings, hello, how are you? How are you doing today, Amy? Good to hear from you, good to see you. Let me know what part of the beautiful world you all are joining from today. And let me know in the comments below if you've ever had a situation come up where you had some confidential information that you needed to share and you just weren't sure how to go about sharing it. All right, Amy, thank you so much for saying I'm fine. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I'm here really to support you and help you master communicating at a higher level than your peers so you can stand out from everyone else and be that exceptional leader that we need in the world today. Now, we talked about confidential information. If you've been in any leadership role for any amount of time, there is probably some information you can't discuss. I can say personally, I've been a C-suite executive and manager, director for the past 20 years, and there's several conversations that I can't talk about. I cannot talk about them. I can't go into detail, even though I do not work for those employers anymore. Now, before I go into the strategies to help you be able to master these very challenging conversations when they come up in interview settings, let me see, something else came up in the chat. Amy said, where are you from? All right, Amy, Amy, I'm actually in the Sunshine State right now, but I'm originally from North Carolina, if you are wondering. So thank you for asking. All right, so let me start off with the very most important thing you need to do before you even have this conversation. And this can be applicable to discussions you're having with your peers or with your friends or with other individuals. These are foundations, the fundamentals you need to know. First is take some quiet time. And people underestimate how much time can really help you to grow in terms of an individual. especially in an executive coaching setting like what I do with my clients, you would be surprised how much you can uncover, how much you can just make big movement on in a coaching setting. So if you have never worked with an executive coach, I'm an executive coach, but generally speaking, if you work with an executive coach that has a pretty good skill set, you're going to be in a really great place. So the first thing you need to do is to think about what specifically can you not talk about. The reason I say this is first is because when you are in those situations where it's confidential information you can't share, sometimes you can get thrown off guard. You can, because oftentimes you're in the interview or you're preparing for it. Sometimes when you're in interview settings, you may feel a bit nervous and you just may slip and say something that you don't need to say. Well, you don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that. So make sure you take a few moments to see exactly what it is specifically that you can talk about in this conversation. That's the first part of it. Now, the second part of it, I'm going to go into in just a few moments. Let me see who came in the chat. Hayden. Hello, Hayden. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing today? I appreciate you being here. Let me know if you have any questions as it relates to handling very complicated situations in interviews, especially as it relates to confidential information. All right, so Amy said, do you watch football or are you a fan of football? Yes, I do watch football. I have not watched football in a long time because I spend most of my time here with you all, honestly, with you and my kids. So yes, I do watch football. Am I a fan? Yes, I am a fan of football, but I haven't watched it really recently. So thank you for asking. And let me know if you're a fan of football, Amy. What teams do you like? All right, so we talked a bit about you need to take some quiet time. There's a lot of power in time. All time is not the same. I will tell you that for sure. If you have that quiet focus time, it is not the same as if you're just thinking while you're working or listening to something. So think about what specifically can you say in your interview as it relates to this role that you were in or situation. That's first. Second is think about what you can say in this particular role that you were in. You have to know your boundaries. This is where people really struggle with. Leaders struggle with this. Men struggle with this. Women struggle with this in a professional setting. Oftentimes we just don't know what those boundaries are. So it's very good if you can clearly define your boundaries in your mind before you go into an interview and you have to talk about confidential information. I have a 3-part video series that talks about boundaries on my YouTube channel. It is under my pre-recorded videos. It's an older video, so I am very different compared to then and now in terms of how the videos are. But it is a good video for you to think about how can you set some of those boundaries about topics that you want to talk about and you don't want to talk about. But specifically for confidential information, you need to think about what specifically in this arrangement that you have can you share and what specifically can you not share? Because you need to know that. So if you are asked a question in an interview setting and someone asks you something that is related to a topic you can't talk about, then you immediately don't have to fumble and think like, oh, I'm not sure if I can talk about this. No, you clearly already know in the conversation in the interview that this is a topic you cannot discuss. This is a great way for you to establish your executive presence when you are in an interview. Know what you want to talk about ahead of time. This, by far, is probably one of the most important steps you need to do because as years goes by and we're busy in different roles, we sometimes will forget, oh, I'm not supposed to talk about that. I'm not supposed to talk about this. So make sure you have a very good set of boundaries in mind in terms of what you need to talk about, what you do not need to talk about. Now, specifically, the next step I'm going to go into is one step that I told Forensic Accountant in our video earlier this year. So I'm going to go into that in just a moment. Amy said, I'm a fan of football. I'm in Germany. Oh, hello, welcome. Germany fan, Munich fan, and I have one question. Absolutely, Amy, go ahead and ask me your question. Be happy to answer it to you. Let me know if I have any questions specifically as it relates to this topic, and I'll help you out as best I can. The second overall strategy, I would say, is that you have to let these individuals know specifically what it is that is going to be happening in the interview. If you can give them a heads up and you can say, I have an NDA. An NDA, for those of you who do not know, is a non-disclosure agreement. Or maybe you have a confidentiality agreement, something like that, then make sure you let them know in the interview. If they ask you questions specifically as it relates to this topic, You could easily say, I have an NDA. There's certain things I can't discuss. There's some aspects of the project that I can't discuss, but I can share with you whatever it is that you can share. This is a great way for you to not appear evasive and elusive when you're in an interview, because it's a balance. You want them to get to know you, and you want to get to know them. And if you are in settings where you can't specifically talk about a confidential aspect of your role or your job, you don't want to come across that person who is just very cryptic and you're just not really trusting of them. If you say it in such a way to where you say, that's a really great question, I can share with you what I can talk about. I do have a non-disclosure agreement with that particular organization, but what I can share with you is something that is completely not with the NDA. So that's a great way to still appear very warm when you have those type of conversations that are going on. Okay, before I go into my last strategy for you today, let me see what's going on in the chat. All right, so Amy says, question, Messi or Ronaldo? Okay, I know of those names, and I'm aware that they are very, very big individuals in sports. I have personally not followed either one of them that closely to even be able to give you an answer in terms of who I would favor. I could not. I have to do a bit more following of those individuals so that I know more about them, but I wouldn't want to say who I would support if I have no knowledge of them. I have very minor, but not enough to say who would pick in the question. All right, the Baker family, hello, welcome, welcome. Glad you're here today. And if you have any questions as it relates to getting yourself prepared for confidential questions in an interview, then let me know in the comments below. I want to know from you all, have you ever been in a situation where you have had to give a interview response, but the response was going to be very confidential and you just weren't sure of what you should say, how you should say it? Let me know in the comments below. Please let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to help you and provide some insight in terms of what you could potentially do in those type of situations. Now, my final strategy, and this is very, very important when you are trying to not say confidential information to an employer while you're doing an interview, is to truly master your tone of voice. This, by far, is one of the most important aspects of communication. You can have a very hard, difficult conversation with someone, but the way you say it can make it not as hard or difficult. This same practice that I'm sharing with you can be applied to confidential information that you cannot share in an interview. For example, there's two different ways you could potentially say this. Let's say someone asked me a question about an NDA that I have that I know I can't talk about. I'm going to give you two ways that I could answer it. And you tell me in the comments below which way do you think would be more appropriate or maybe well received by an interviewer. So they asked me a question. Tell me about your time when you worked at role XYZ and maybe a conflict that you had. So I can answer it. This is the first way. The first way is, I can't talk about that. I have an NDA. Do you have another question? Does that feel warm? Does that feel like a nice response to say to an interviewer? No. That's definitely not a nice way to say it. I could have said it a little bit differently. Now, let's say it in a more positive way that is a bit more warm, that doesn't sound like I just am completely being evasive and I don't want to talk to you about this topic. I can't talk about it. So someone asked me, can you please tell me about your time working at position company XYZ and you had a conflict with a coworker or something like that? I would say, I appreciate that. Working for XYZ was great. I had a wonderful time there, really enjoyed the relationships I had with a lot of my coworkers and other stakeholders in the community. There are certain aspects of conflicts and coworkers that I'm not able to discuss because I have an NDA with them. However, I will share with you that one of the biggest challenges that I have learned when you have those conflicts with coworkers is that you have to figure out where everyone is coming from. Everyone comes from different places. They may have different experiences. They may have external factors that are impacting how they're thinking and how they're responding. And being very empathetic is something that is very helpful, and I found that it can really improve the outcome if you have a challenging or difficult conversation with a coworker. Now, which response would you go to a hiring manager with if you had to choose one? I would say response number 2. I still said, no, I can't talk about it, but my tone of voice was not, no, I can't talk about that. I can't talk about that. It wasn't that. It was more in a warm type of way, saying, yes, I had a great time. I showed energy, saying that, yes, this was great. I had a wonderful time there. However, I cannot talk about this topic. I still brought in and I still talked about something related to the subject, which was, let's say, dealing with a difficult coworker or something I just made up. But I still was able to have that conversation about it and put it in such a way to where it still sounds very friendly, very conversational, because that's extremely important when you are in an interview setting. All right, let me look in the chat and see what is being said, and then we'll go into any questions you all have, and then I will wrap this live up. Okay, so Amy said, say please Messi or Ronaldo. I'm a fan of both. Okay, well, I just read what you said. So that's great that you're a fan of both. Definitely, as I mentioned, I need to learn a bit more about both of them. I know they're very, very important names in the sports industry. I do know that. I know they're soccer players. In terms of specific, I don't know, but I'm glad you're a fan of both of them. That's wonderful. So Amy said, I'm going to sleep. In Germany, it's 2:05 p.m. Wow, okay. So that's pretty early in the afternoon. Here, I'm in the United States. It is 8:07 p.m. So that's great. Understood. I appreciate you being here today, even though I know you're probably tired and ready to lay down or take a nap. So let me know in the comments below, was any of this information helpful to you? There's different ways you can handle these conversations when you have to discuss confidential information. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be stressful. The main aspect of it is planning ahead in terms of what specifically you need to say. What is it you need to talk about? For those of you who are just joining, welcome, welcome. What is it that you can talk about in your NDA or in your confidential situation? What can you not talk about? What can you talk about? Know your parameters, know your boundaries, as I say in my 3-part video series. Know your boundaries. What can you say? What can you not say? Then let them know. There's some topics that I may not be able to go into detail about because I have an NDA or I have a confidentiality agreement that I can't go into detail, but I'll share with you as much as I can. And so as long as you let them know and you're very cordial with it, the conversation, people will be understanding and they know that, okay, we understand you can't talk about that. And it actually sets you up as it relates to your executive presence, because executives are those individuals who know a lot of information. I've been an executive for a very long time, and you just learn countless things about people personally, professionally, a lot of things that you just never even wanted to know. But if you can position yourself in such a way to say, there's certain things I can't discuss, it really makes you stand out as a candidate. Not only because you're setting yourself as an executive, as that person who can have that conversation with you and let you know there's certain things they can't discuss, but if they hire you as an employee, then they know you will show that same level of respect if something happens and you separate from the company and you are not sharing that information too. So it's a great way to really set yourself up as that candidate that stands out. And that's the most important aspect of interviewing. You want to stand out as that person who is the most amazing individual for this role. And great ways to do that is, if you have those situations that come up, especially confidentiality wise, is to really showcase how you can handle this situation. Of course, as I mentioned, you mentioned that you have an NDA or confidentiality agreement. There's certain things you may not be able to discuss, but you share as much as you can. And then your tone of voice is so important. If you come across as, no, I can't talk about this, I have an NDA with this, it's just so offsetting. You see people on TV, different leaders and etc., when they're asked questions, it's just, no, I can't talk about it. No, I can't talk about it. You see, my tone of voice is a bit lower. It sounds very dismissive, like, no, I can't talk about it. Well, you can say it that way, but that may make the interviewer feel as if you're just being evasive. Try to say what you can say and say it in a very polite, kind, cordial type of voice to make people feel that, oh, okay, well, he has an NDA, he can't talk about it, or she has a confidentiality agreement, she can't talk about it. But I really like the way that she was at least able to share something. So it will set you apart in your interview. All right, let me take a look in the chat. Let's see. Forensic Accountant said bye. Okay. And very helpful. Thank you, Forensic Accountant. I appreciate that. And Forensic Accountant said, I would have participated more vigorously, but my space was being invaded. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear about your space being invaded. I hope all is well on your end. And I do want to give a shout out again to Forensic Accountant because this initial question came up from him. And it was a very good question. And it is something that people don't really talk about. I know on my channel, I have not had anyone ask me a question like that. And it's very, very helpful because if you have been in leadership, in a leadership role for an extended amount of time, this particular type of question directly applies to you. So this is something that you may notice as a newer leader, but definitely your more seasoned leaders, like some of the individuals that are on my channel, for instance, Forensic Accountant, because this was discussed in a previous video, then you have these scenarios that have happened over your course of your career where you just simply cannot talk about a topic in detail because you have a few other things that you're trying to discuss that may be more relevant to the position you're applying for. You just can't share. Sometimes you are not able to, but it's just the way you have the conversation. This is one of the most important, I would say, mindset shifts that I would share with anyone, especially as a leader, as a woman in leadership, as a man in leadership. You can have those challenging conversations. You can have those difficult conversations. It all depends on how you say it. You can say it in a very polite, cordial way, even if you have to say something that is very hard for someone to hear. It's just the way that you have to say it. That's all that it comes down to. If you can master how you communicate, you will be able to accelerate your career growth. I say on my channel, people become great by how they communicate. And I mean that in all sincerity. If you can communicate not only verbally, non-verbally, and in a written format as well, it really truly will help you to elevate in your career, to be able to do different things, accelerate your growth, earn more income, and make that big impact on the world that you're trying to do. Okay, Forensic Accountant said, some people can't hold water. Yes, that is true. You definitely don't want to show this in an interview. Yes, so Forensic Accountant, that is a fantastic point that you bring up. And for those of you who may not understand what can't hold water means, can't hold water specifically means that you are not able to keep information to yourself. And so depending on where you're from or what culture you're from, can't hold water is something I'm very familiar with. But if you don't know what that means, can't hold water means you are not able to keep things to yourself in terms of conversations and etc. Now, I will say that if you can't hold water, as Forensic Accountant said, in an interview, it comes across very, 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 very bad. The reason why I say that is because when you are talking to an interview, and if you're talking all these type of things about your former employer, oh, you don't like them, they did this, they did that, and they did this and that and everything else, then what ends up happening is that they will not look favorably upon you as a candidate. They look at you as someone who is trying to potentially stir up drama and may bring that drama to their workplace. And most companies, I would say most, I can't say all because there's some out there that just thrive on drama, but most companies, especially as professionals, they don't really want that to come into their workplace. They're not interested in dealing with drama and a lot of office gossip and things like that. It just comes across as not being professional. There's a balance. You can always say if there's something that you differ with, maybe you have a different perspective, a different philosophy, that's fine. But not being able to know when to say nothing and leave a topic alone is very, 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 very damaging when you are in an interview. And a lot of times this happens when people have been in roles where they have been under some type of pressure, or they have had some type of emotional scarring as it relates to these specific roles, because what happens is those emotions come out. And I talk about this, and I've talked about this in a couple times, and I do this with my one-on-one clients too. When you're in those interview settings, especially those high stakes conversations, in terms of what I specifically work with and master with my clients, you have to know your triggers. So you have to know if there's a certain situation that has happened to you in the past, whether personally or professionally, and it's something that you talk about specifically. If you know that if you are asked this question or this topic comes up, that you cannot hold water, as forensic accountant said, and you're going to just say everything, then you know this is a topic that you really have to work on in terms of your mindset, in terms of how you're managing it, because you definitely don't want to share and get into the very emotional, highly emotional state as it relates to a topic that is emotional for you. We all have them. Everyone has a topic. Everyone has had a role, a position in their career that has at some point in time really bothered them, to the point where they may just say exactly what's on their mind. And that's fine. You can do that, but just do it in a very concise way that's impactful, in a format where you're not talking recommend. Sorry, my video went out again. This is something that I recommend, is to really think about your triggers. What are those triggers that you have that can cause you to say more than what you need to say and cause you not to hold water? So appreciate that, forensic accountant. That's a very, very good piece of advice that you gave, because you definitely don't want to show that in an interview. And being very concise in the interview is very important. I've mentioned this on a previous live. You have to know what your triggers are. They're very important. And a lot of times in interview settings, when you're preparing for interviews, people do not talk about these things. And the reason why they don't talk about them is they may not have been in a situation where they've done hundreds of interviews like I have. And oftentimes they'll say, well, prepare for your questions and do practice interviews, which are very important. I do that with my clients all the time, and they're very successful with them. But knowing your triggers is really, really, really important. Taking that quiet time to think, what are my triggers? What are the topics that either will make me really upset, and I may say something that is not going to help me in an interview, or maybe there's a topic that specifically you could talk about all day. So I talked about my topics in a previous live video. So I have my own topics where if someone asked me a specific question about them, I could pretty much just talk about them for a very long time. And those are my triggers. So I know if I hear a conversation about public speaking, or they ask me about it, or if they ask me a question about cars, then more than likely I can probably talk about them for a long time. And I know that's a trigger, because I don't want to spend too much of my time on the interview talking about public speaking and cars. That's for me personally. I know what my triggers are. So I know those specific topics that I will start to chat a lot more than I need to. So you just have to know what your triggers are. Whatever those triggers are, then make sure you come up with a response for them and divert the conversation back to the question that was being asked. So you basically, a good deflection would be, I really appreciate that. I do have an interest in public speaking. It's a great topic. It's something I'm really passionate about. But I'm really looking forward to learning more about your organization and some of the challenges that you all are facing, so I can see how I can potentially support you and be an asset to your department or organization. So I just turned the conversation back around. When you figure out someone is asking you something or telling you something that is a trigger for you, whatever that trigger is, then make sure you address the question, but then turn it around back to the interviewer so that you can keep the conversation back on track. This is something I personally do all the time. Whenever I was interviewing for positions, I teach my clients this too, because it's so easy in interviews to not be concise. And this is not being concise is probably the number one challenge that many people in my audience have, is that they do not know how to speak in a concise way, because they just feel like they have to just share everything and tell everything and just ramble on and on and on. You don't really need to do that in an interview setting. So really great point. So I appreciate that. So I want to know from any of you, especially in the comments below, if you have any questions as it relates to this topic, then let me know. If being able to handle this confidential information and being able to communicate in a very elevated way it's something that you want some support with, then reach out to me for a strategy session in the description below. It is a conversation where you and I will just talk about where you are, where you would like to be, and see how we can get you to that next level in your career much faster by working together. So I appreciate you all being present today and asking some really great questions and having some very interesting dialogue. The things about the lives that people sometimes they don't realize is that sometimes live conversations can go in different directions. And I've had lives where we've talked about children and in terms of being able to support them and working for jobs that didn't really care about their personal lives. We've talked about different other scenarios in terms of Bitcoin. We've talked about different streams of income. We talk about a lot of different things that come up. We just talked about Messi and Ronaldo just a few moments ago. So I appreciate you all being patient and just knowing that this is alive and this is me being present with you all. There are conversations that come up that may not necessarily be directly related to our topic, but hopefully you'll find some insight in those conversations whenever they come up. This is just a part of the live. This is what we do. This is how lives work. For those of you who do not know, I've been doing live so much on YouTube here within the past, oh my goodness, I would say almost going on 7 months now, that YouTube invited me to their live streamer research panel. So I'm going to be on that panel for the next year. So I'm going to be providing them with insights and tips, strategies to help improve the live streaming experience for people on YouTube here, because I'm doing so many lives. So this is what lives are about. They're a lot of fun. They are a little bit longer, but this is what happens sometimes in live. We just talk about different topics depending on what's going on. Okay, something came in the chat. So Forensic Accountant said, don't get me started on Bitcoin. Exclamation mark. Forensic Accountant said, that's a cuss word. Oh no. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. We had a conversation with Pro BTC previously about Bitcoin. We had a long conversation about Bitcoin, and he obviously is in Bitcoin, and we talked a bit about it and talked about diversifying income streams, similar to what we talked about yesterday. So understand, I know Bitcoin has its pros and cons. Sometimes you'll get money, sometimes you'll lose money, and then sometimes you lose more money. So I've done some investing in Bitcoin before, and this was years ago. It was good, and then it just dropped really fast, and so you're not able to get as much as you need to. Now, where things are right now in the market, I have not been observing them very carefully. I'm going to probably get back into that here very soon, but I can understand, depending on which cryptocurrency you're going for, there can be pros, there can be cons. So I just let that one go. All right, Forensic Accountant said, you have no idea how many criminal cases I've worked surrounding Bitcoin. Really? Okay, wow, interesting. So I am sure there's probably some NDAs there for sure. Absolutely. But yes, there's a lot of things out there. You have to be very, 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 very careful. Oh, you have to just be careful with so many things nowadays. It's to the point, believe it or not, you have to be careful even with jobs, even with applying for positions. I have communicated with several prospective clients, and we were able to connect and talk. And one of the things that is going on now, to allude to like criminal cases and people maybe doing things with your information, sometimes the jobs are scams. It's just a scam to get your personal information. And that can be very, very scary, especially when you're in a position and you're just trying to apply for a job. It did not used to be this way. And it's unfortunate that it's this way. And it's unfortunate that there are a lot of criminal cases that happen surrounding Bitcoin. So Forensic Accountant, I appreciate you mentioning that. And yes, that is definitely something that is really challenging. Okay, so the Forensic Accountant said, the thing people don't realize is that when you commit financial dirt, we look at all of your relationships. That is true, because it's just a snowball effect. You have to check all those things out. And Forensic Accountant says, your mama, everybody. Exactly. So sometimes when people do crimes and they commit a fraud or they commit crimes or etc., they don't think of the impacts that this crime will have on their families and other people that they are associated with. Look at some of there's all types of cases that have been going on in the world for the past year about people and crimes and who's associated with these crimes and who's associated and another associate of these crimes. You have to be very, 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 very careful with, one, don't commit a crime. I mean, just don't do it. Just don't do it. I can say just don't do it, but there's people that this is what they do, this is what they live for, or this is all they want to do. Forensic accountant knows that too. This is just what people do. They just want to commit crimes. But then two, you have to be really careful with who you associate yourself with. If you ever have an intuitive sense that someone is doing something that's not right, distance yourself as quickly as you can, because ultimately when something happens and there's some dirt, financial dirt, as the forensic accountant said, then you know for sure that you are going to be evaluated just as much as they will be. And it's just it's frustrating. Sometimes you may not even know what's going on, and that part is very discouraging and concerning also. But sometimes if you have some intuitive sense, just stay away. I mean, this is something that is very important as it relates to communication too, because if you have been in a situation where you have been associated with someone that is doing some unsavory things, or maybe doing some financial dirt or something like that, when you are asked a question about it, it puts you in a very, very, very difficult situation to respond. So what's the best solution? To just simply don't be involved. Be very selective in terms of who you interact with, who you work with, because you never know what's going to happen. And when it happens, and when they start investigating you, for me, just personally, it is the equivalent of a snowball. The snowball starts small. We have one person of interest that we're working with, that we're looking into to see exactly what's going on. But then the snowball is rolling down a hill that is a hill full of snow, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the spread just encompasses so many people, and you just don't want to be that person in the snowball. I don't want to be the person in the snowball, and I encourage you all not to be the person in the snowball either. I'm sure forensic accountant would say the same thing. You don't want to do that, because it's a lot that you have to end up dealing with, and oftentimes it's not worth it. There's many people who know someone is doing a crime. They know they're doing something incorrectly, but they just stay quiet because they just stay quiet. And sometimes it's just simply not worth it. Okay, forensic accountant said, like we said yesterday, it's an opportunity killer. Yes, no one wants to hire you. They do not. They do not. Especially when you have those situations that happen. They don't want to hire you, and it really truly will impact your career if you are participating in a crime or associated with a crime. And as I mentioned before, I know individuals that have done crimes professionally, and their careers in that specific field, they are done. I mean, they are literally done, and they have to transition into something completely different whenever they get out of jail. So it is an opportunity killer. It's just not worth it. Sometimes people think in the short term, oh, I'm going to make some additional money. I'm going to pay off some additional debts. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of that, and think that no one can find out. There are people out there that will find out, like the forensic accountant. They will find out financially what is going on. This is what they are trained to do. So you just want to be mindful that a lot of times it's just not worth it. You may think it's something to think about, just like we talked about yesterday as it relates to COVID and the PPP. There's a lot of fraud that happened with that. Unfortunately, there was all types of stories in the media where people were buying different vehicles, they were buying houses, they were doing other things, and that's not what the purpose of those funds were for. And I believe they thought that they were just going to spend it and no one was going to audit them or think about what these funds were being used for. And then it comes up to where you have a lot of things that are red flags. People start digging, they start looking, and that's when the snowball happens. When it's focused on one person, and it starts to impact other people that they know. So protect yourself at all times in a career. You have to do that. This is very, very, very important. Be careful who you associate with, and not only for criminal activity, but even just as you are developing, you have to be careful who you are associating yourself with, because the people that you surround yourself with are the people that will either elevate you or the people that will prevent you from growing. And we've all been in situations like that professionally where you may have individuals you work with that are a bit more negative than what you'd like for them to be. Limit your time with them, or maybe people in your inner circle that are a bit more negative. You have to start setting your boundaries. And the video series I mentioned to you earlier, I talk about that, but I was fast forward to several years later. You have to set boundaries not only in terms of what you actually are saying, but you have to set boundaries in your mind also, because those boundaries are very important. You have to know, who am I going to associate with myself with, and who is going to drag me down? I know personally for me, I've had situations where there's been people that I have interacted with in the past that maybe changed and turned into a more negative direction, and I don't interact with them. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to protect yourself really at all times. You really do. And if you are watching this channel or subscribe to my channel, I know that there's a bigger purpose, there's a bigger mission that you're trying to accomplish during your time here on this earth. And in order for you to do that, you have to be around like-minded people that want you to elevate just as much as I do, or anyone else that hopefully is supporting on the channel. We want you all to grow. We want you to grow. We want you to exceed the expectations that you have for yourself and your career, and really start impacting not just your community, but start impacting the world by the things that you're doing and projects you're wanting to start on, and etc. This is how growth happens. It doesn't happen when you're having someone basically dragging you down. It's like you're trying to row a boat, and you can't row the boat if your anchor is still down in the ground. You can't do it. You have to let the anchor go so that you can sail off to do whatever it is that you want to do. So keep that in mind, especially as it relates to who you're interacting with. That's a very good analogy, because those people will just sink you, and you will not go forward, and you'll fast forward and look 3 years later and say, oh my goodness, why am I not where I want to be? And I mention this because I have a lot of clients that deal with challenges just like this. They wonder, why am I not where I need to be? And that's where you come to me for, so I can help you get to that level. And we uncover, well, what is it that's preventing you? And oftentimes I hear someone is not supportive, or someone's not doing this, or there's a lot of things that are going on. So let me see what Forensic Accountant said. 100%. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your insight on that, because these type of situations, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to be around negative people. So Forensic Accountant said, I have a story to tell you one day about a near miss when I was young, broke, and working in retail. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing that story whenever you're ready to share. That would be fantastic. And yes, so, and that near miss that happened was obviously a very, very important moment of your life, and was probably a very defining moment in your life also, where you shifted gears and became the amazing person that you are right now. That's what those moments are for. They happen to all of us at some point in our career. There's some defining moment where you know that your life will never be the same. In the good way, hopefully always in a good way. Sometimes it may be a little bit different, but who knows? So yes, absolutely looking forward to hearing that story whenever you're ready to share. All right, so if you all have any additional questions as it relates to anything, as we talked about today, we talked about interviewing, confidential questions, we talked about don't commit crimes. Please don't do that. And make sure you be careful of who you are interacting with, because it can absolutely shape your career in a very good way, or it can shape your career in a very, very, very protect your energy, because there are people out there who may not be as happy for you as you think they are, and you may not know that until it's too late. So you want to definitely make sure, be careful who you're interacting with. But I appreciate you all being here. And Forensic Accountant said, I had a decision to make. If I had followed my friends, I am not a forensic accountant today. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I appreciate you sharing that so much, because you have to make decisions. And this is what executives do. People struggle with decisions all of the time. And one of the reasons why people are sometimes afraid of leadership roles is they're afraid of making decisions. And even outside of leadership roles, people really struggle with decisions because it's hard. Decisions are not easy. You have to figure out exactly what specifically it is that you need to do. And sometimes it's just hard. I mean, we've all made very, very difficult decisions. I appreciate the Forensic Accountant so much for bringing that up. And I'm glad that you did not follow your friends and you became a forensic accountant. So that is fantastic. And I appreciate you sharing that. Everybody keep in mind that decisions are hard, but what's even harder is if you wait. to make the decision. Same thing as if you're trying to advance in your career or you're trying to elevate how you communicate. You will cost yourself a lot more time, a lot more money if you're not able to get yourself in a position to where you can either make a decision to move forward. And if you can't, if you're having a hard time, then reach out to somebody to help you make a decision, or at least talk you through it. That's what coaches are for. That's what some counselors or therapists, it depends on what your dynamic is. But there's resources out there to help you when you have those really big decisions to make if you're not quite sure of how to do it, because they can change your life. You can go in one direction of your career or you can go in another direction. And just depending on the situation, some decisions are harder than others, and some decisions are easier to make. But ultimately, if you are a leader and you're watching this channel, making hard decisions, just like the forensic accountant mentioned a moment ago, this is a part of your life. And this is something that happens to the best of us. We as leaders are the individuals that people are looking up to make these decisions and to guide them in the right direction. And not only are we guiding other people, but we have to guide ourselves to make sure we're taking care of ourselves as it relates to these very, very big decisions that are going to be happening that we have to do to make a change in their lives. So I appreciate that, forensic accountant. Thank you so much for that. All right, so feel free to ask me any questions. If you have any other topics that you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments below on any of my videos. I do take a look at those comments. And once again, shout out to Forensic Accountant. Appreciate you being here today for this topic. This is a topic specifically that he mentioned that we should probably have a bit more dialogue about. So I've done this for a couple of my audience members. I did one for Yogesh, and then there was another audience member. I can't remember the handle off the top of my head, but I will definitely give you a video and give you a shout out if there's a topic specifically as it relates to communication, leadership, executive presence, all the things that I really focus on here on my channel, and you want to elevate how you are communicating and how you are leading other individuals, then just put them in the comments below. I will absolutely do a video just for you and make sure that I give at least a good perspective for you to work with. I will most likely do it live. If I feel like I need to go into even more detail in a more formal setting, then I'll probably end up doing a live and a pre-recorded video. It just depends on the topic and how deep you all want me to go into it, because I can share a lot from over the past 20 years that can help you get into the right mindset and be able to communicate at a very, very elevated and higher level than your peers. So I appreciate you all being here. And Forensic Accountant said, I have one. Okay, great. If you want to share it now, I'll wait for a few moments. If not, you're welcome to put it in the comments. But if you have another topic, that would be fantastic. And while I'm waiting for a Forensic Accountant, I do want to say that I have a executive presence class that I'm going to be hosting on August the 18th. That's going to be on LinkedIn. So definitely make sure you tune into that. So Forensic Accountant says, what do you do when your boss steals your idea? Oh, okay. That's a great question because it's happened to me before. So that is a really good question. So that actually deserves its own video for sure. Absolutely. So I will do a video just for you on that one. And I may end up doing that either tomorrow or I may end up doing it this upcoming week. But I'll do it here relatively soon just for you. I will give you a spoiler of when your boss steals your idea. There's so many things that go into that. I personally have dealt with that before. And I would say as a teaser, I would say for this conversation is it's probably not what you expect. So when you have an idea like that, there's a couple things you have to do before you even talk about the idea. So there's a way that you can go about doing it. This is more along the lines of influence. So you have to basically put in your influence to other people so that when this happens, it looks odd on the boss. So that's a teaser I would say for, or a spoiler to talk about this topic. But yes, definitely we can do a live video on that and give you some tips in terms of what you should do. This video that I will do for that topic is definitely going to be more of a higher level, more advanced video, because if you are asking questions like that, you're definitely at a advanced level in terms of leadership. So I'll do a video just for you, forensic accountant, on that topic, because that's a very, very good one. And these are topics that people don't really talk about because they don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. Sometimes people just have not been in that situation. And it is hard unless you have actually lived through it. Then you know how to handle these situations. And that's the reason why I mentioned that your influence is very, very so important when you're in a professional setting and when you're establishing your executive presence. Influence is very, very key, because when situations like that happen, people will start to notice that something is wrong very quickly, depending on what you're able to do ahead of time before that happens. But I'll give you some strategies in terms of how do you deal with that, what do you do, how do you move forward, what should you think about doing, and etc. So that should be a very good live video. Definitely will get that for you either tomorrow or possibly this upcoming Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when I go back live next week. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that idea. And if y'all have any other topics you want me to talk more about, I'd be happy to share with you my over 20 years of experience as a C-suite executive, a manager, a director, a public speaker, and an executive coach, to put all that together to help you fast track when you have those real hard situations that come up. That is my expertise, is dealing with very challenging situations. So if you've dealt with them and you're not sure how to navigate them, feel free to reach out to me, leave me a message. Contact me on Instagram at XLikeExcellence or on LinkedIn at Dr. Jacinta Lamantai, and I will help you as best I can on my journey. So I appreciate your support, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Bye for now.